Hello and welcome to another Xero how-to where we're going to look at bills and their errors. Now I'll put errors in the inverted commas because actually these aren't necessarily errors. They're not going to mess up your accounts too dramatically if they're not done in a certain way. But they're common things where if we're using another system like Receipt Bank, HubDoc, auto entry, or if we're manually entering data, these are the sort of items which crop up quite regularly. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys and we're going to look into a lovely demo company who always lends its hand to our demos. So I'm going to scroll down and what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the process of making a new bill from a perspective of the things we would look for. Now, this principle applies irrespective of whether you're using another system to import your bills automatically for you, because these things do occur. So the first thing I would say with bills is do please double check the contact. This is where we often get duplicates. So what I would say is whenever typing in a contact, I'm not actually sure which contacts I've got available in here, but whenever typing a contact, please do select them from the drop down list. Because quite frankly, if I type out basket case again and simply hit enter, because I've entered it slightly differently, it's going to create a new contact record, which means for accounts payable, it splits it out into two contacts. We can, of course, rectify this by merging contacts, but selecting it from the drop-down list is the best way to ensure we don't need to going forward. Now, the other thing to check will be dates and due dates. If we're importing from systems or creating them manually, these can sometimes cause errors. So the date, if we're entering it manually, will just default to today's date. And likewise, the due date may also default to the standard payment terms of whatever we have set up in the organization or a given supplier. But please do check the due date and the date on these items because they may actually be different to those. If we're importing it from a system, what you might see, Receipt Bank's a classic example. If we import a receipt and it doesn't actually have a clear date on it, what it will do is Receipt Bank will put the date it was submitted to Receipt Bank. So not particularly ideal if you're submitting last month's expenses and it catches them in the wrong period. So please do check those. As for due date, we can either simply overtype whatever's in there. We can select it from the calendar. We can select plus and simply enter how many dates the due date is. And this is the best way to check it. What I would do is check invoices with direct debits. These are the ones that often cause the biggest confusion with this because what happens is they often get the date of the invoice and the due date, and often the due date happens to default to the same date as the actual invoice. But the reality is the direct debit may be collected in, say, 20 days or 15 days or something really a little bit out there, a little bit unusual, not quite the standard 14 days necessarily. Now, I would take advantage of the reference field. This is the field which prevents duplicates. I'd say it's one of the most important fields to pay notice to, because if we enter in an invoice code, say I had one which was invoice reference 007, if I already had an invoice with that exact reference in there, I would get a warning message which was saying, please just double check this. And I'd have a little link in here. I could right click it, I could open it in a new tab, and I could check that they're actually genuinely separate invoices. I haven't mistyped anything. Receipt Bank hasn't picked up the wrong reference. Really, really handy tool. So please do make sure in the reference field this is correct. If Receipt Bank or Auto Entry or HubDoc can't pick up an actual reference field, it will default to, say, RB, yada, 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 lots of digits, and it won't pick up the duplicates properly. So please, if you have got any of these, do overtype them if they are available. Alternatively, some of them might not actually have an invoice reference, might be a train ticket receipt, in which case you can just leave it as is. So, next thing I would say, always attach a copy of the electronic file. Clears out your space in your storage because you don't need to keep the receipt because you've got the electronic copy here, and all of a sudden it's attached to the transaction. So this is useful on many aspects. Firstly, if HMRC ever carry out an audit and you need to review anything, you can instantly review any documentation right at your fingertips. But I'm going to say more importantly, but HMRC will disagree. More importantly, it helps us internally, because if we ever need to check anything on the invoice, such as the due date, the reference, etc., just any element, even the total amount, we can simply click into it, open up the invoice, it loads to the side, and we can compare the transaction we have in Xero with the attached file. It justifies why we've coded something into a certain account code, why we've got a certain due date, why we've got a certain reference. So massively useful definitely use this functionality. Moving on, so what we have next is description fields. Always make use of this. If you're importing from another system, you might just see that as a description. It's not much help when you're trying to review your account codes in, say, if you go into profit and loss and drill into an account code, you'll see basket case, dot. That's not particularly helpful. You can't tell from the face of it whether it's been coded to an incorrect place. So what I would put here is if you've bought baskets, simply put, baskets, because then you know where it's going to go. And it means when you review your P&L, you can check for anything sitting in the wrong account code nice and quickly, rather than having to drill into all these blank descriptions to see what's going on. Then, of course, unit price, quantity, we're all pretty comfortable with those. So I'm going to move on to the next section. The account code I'm actually going to come back to, because that, out of all of the fields, is probably the one which causes the most problems. Not necessarily problems, confusions, dilemmas. So it's the one I'm going to come back to. I'm going to show you a little trick on that one. Always check the tax amounts, and are the amounts tax exclusive or tax inclusive? This can often cause a bit of dilemma, because if you're entering in an account, and in fact, actually, I'm just going to, for now, I'm just going to enter this as a blank field, so I've got placeholders so we can see what's going on. As an example, I now have tax inclusive invoice total of £50. Okay, I'm going to change it to tax exclusive. All of a sudden, I have an invoice which is £50 plus VAT, so the actual invoice is total of £60. Now, this one is really key to take note of, because it's often the one that causes confusions. If we're entering an invoice, it's like, I can't get the totals to match. Usually, it's this box which is causing the problem, because we might have an invoice which is marked as tax inclusive when it's actually meant to be tax exclusive, and it's the one that catches people out. But it's a nice, easy fix. Really easy. With any bills, take advantage of your tracking codes if you have these set up. If you don't have these set up, these fields will be blank, so please don't worry about them too much if you don't have tracking codes. That's a separate topic in itself. Now, what you might find, as mentioned, I'm going to come back to the account code, but what you might find is when you're editing a bill that's already in the system, you might go in, you might realise, actually, I've set it to the wrong tax status, it should be tax exclusive. So you merrily go in, and actually I'm just going to approve this so I can show you how it works. I'm going to approve it, I'm going to go back into it, and I'm going to show you what sometimes happens. So say this is a bill, it's committed, it's approved, I actually have my attachment. In this case I don't, but for the purpose of this argument we'll pretend we do. And I'm going to go into my bill and I'm going to edit it. Now this is something I see very often. It catches me out, it catches everyone out. So basically I've gone into this invoice and I've gone, it's tax exclusive, meant to be tax inclusive. So I've gone and changed it. And then I've clicked update and I've thought nothing of it. I've clicked update, I've closed the tab. What's actually happened is an error's happened. So if I close the tab now, I haven't changed anything in this invoice whatsoever, because it's been locked out by an error code. Now the reason this has happened is because it's a control mechanism built in by Xero. This total field up here is saying this invoice was first approved with a value of £60. The total value is now £50. So it's the way Xero says, okay, this is the amount logged in. It stops us accidentally changing something which we didn't mean to. So if you do need to amend a bill in this system and actually go, it's complete wrong amount, I've checked the invoice attachment, it says it's £50, you can do one or two things. You can either change the total to the revised total, or you can simply clear it, make it a blank field, so literally go over it, delete everything in the content, and then we can update the field. So that sounds like it sounds like a bit of a silly one, but the amount of times I've gone in to edit an invoice, thought I've edited the invoice, realised I haven't, catches me out a lot, catches everyone out. So please do check that if you're editing a bill at any point. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention about bills is the one which confuses people the most. It causes the most dilemma. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill into the account code, and I'm going to have a look at this. And what we can see is, if we're raising a bill, we'll see the expenses first, and later on we'll see assets, we'll see liabilities, and we'll see revenue, equity, etc. So basically, bills are ordered, and the account codes, when you're setting up a bill, will be ordered to show the code which it's most likely to be first. So expenses and assets are usually the ones it's most likely to be. So this is why it's ordered in this way. If you're rating a sales invoice, you'll see the opposite. You'll see revenue first, and then you'll see liability, etc. So you see all of that. Now, with this, the biggest confusion is what code do we actually put it to? Now, this is driven by chart of accounts, which in itself are a separate topic in itself. But if I'm looking through here and I can see my expenses. Now, one little tip is in Xero, we like to set up our direct cost as, say, 300 codes. So anything in the 300s, we know is a cost of sale. It's going to relate to a sale exactly. Anything in 400s will be an overhead. So that's how the Xero default is set up. We like that format. We use that format in practice across all of our clients because it's just a nice format. It makes things easy. So basically 400s, overheads, 300s, cost of sales. It's nice and handy. Now, if you have an account code on here where actually you think, I'm not really sure where it goes to, doesn't really fit any bucket. It's tempting to use general expenses, but I would avoid using that. That should be like a code which ironically is left blank. I'd actually potentially rename that and get rid of it entirely because it doesn't actually add value. So what I would do is instead is if you don't have a code which suits, add one. Best option, add it from here, add a new code, and make sure you're nice and happy. Now, if you have no idea what the actual cost is, and say you're a bookkeeper and you have a client and you want to clear their bank rec, you want to clear all of their draft invoices and get them posted, but you're not entirely sure where the bill goes to, but you want to have something recorded in their annual accounts to say, well, in their profit and loss to say, look, I know there's a cost here, I don't know where it goes. What we do, and what I quite like to do, is I'm going to add a new account and show you how this works. I'm going to add an overhead. So basically it's a non-categorized cost. And I'm going to, what codes have I got available? Let's try 420 and see if that's available. Let's make it a really weird number. Let's do 423. Not for any reason, just because it stands out. What we could actually do is potentially even use 500s to make it really clear. It's a last resort. Now I'm going to use this as queries. Queries. And I'm going to just put which account code. Now this seems a little bit unusual, but what I'm actually doing is saying, okay, I don't know where this is going to go. It's a code I want to reallocate. And what I would do with this one is default it to no VAT so we don't accidentally post something here which doesn't have a VAT component. So I'm going to change it to this account code. There might still be VAT on the document. I might still have the attachment. So I know for a fact if I can claim this and I know what cost it relates to, I'm going to claim the tax rate anyway. You might choose to set this to no VAT, entirely up to you. But this means when we look at our profit and loss account, we have a workflow. So we can look at the client and say, okay, I've got this invoice, it's from this person. And actually all we need to do is open up the account code and you'll see all the details. You'll see it's from basket case, you'll see it's for baskets, you'll see the invoice reference, but you'll see that it's in the queries account code and it needs checking. So it's a really handy little workflow. So that's something I like to use, really recommend it. Now, with bills, there is one little thing. I'm trying to remember what else it is. There's another point I need to mention here. That's a nice little tip. Yes, I remembered exactly what it is. One thing you might see is when you set up an invoice, say the total amount is 50, and you may notice you're a penny out of rounding. Best way to do that is, at the moment, what's happening is tax code is being calculated for me. If I change it to tax exclusive, I get this little plus. Now I can toy with the VAT just a little bit, which is quite helpful. So if I press the plus, I now get to see exactly what the tax amount is, which is really helpful on those little invoices where actually there's a tiny bit of rounding discrepancy. And actually the invoice, this is probably going to be a bad example because of course it's going to be £60, but imagine if this one, the invoice was given to me as, in fact, actually, let's say it's $49.99. What I'm actually going to do, actually no, let's use $59.99, it's easier maths. I can actually just overtype the tax amount because I can see there's, what's this, rounding. This ends up in a balance sheet account code, but actually I can change the tax amount and this just brings our tax in line with where it should be. It means it's correct in the VAT return. This basically adjusts the tax so it doesn't actually sit in a balance sheet as something awaiting reconciliation that needs adjusting for. So it's a handy little way to change our tax amount, just that little bit. And one thing I will say with tax amounts is please do check the total VAT does match the attachment you do have. You may need to add more lines. It may be that one invoice actually has one element which is VATable one element that might be 0 rated or exempt. So please do check. So that's a little overview of some of the various things we see with bills which causes a little bit of confusion. So we've covered the contacts, we've covered the dates, the due date, and the reference field is our prevention mechanism. Prevention mechanism. And then, of course, review the account codes, tax inclusive versus tax exclusive. Look at the tax rates, make sure they're okay. And if editing an invoice at any point in time, please do check the total. Make sure to change that or set it to 0 when you change the total of the invoice if it's intended. Otherwise, you'll get an error message which stops it happening. And then finally, if you have multi-currency, this is where you would customize it here. So please do double check that it's brought through with the correct currency if you are using multi-currency. And that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you have any queries, please do let us know. If you enjoyed this video, please do let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And thank you very much, and hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Bye.